Our next story is from Africa, from Côte d'Ivoire in the west. In English, that's the Ivory Coast. The country has a New Year's resolution. It has made a pledge to kick out French troops. That's right, Paris has lost yet another African stronghold. The Ivory Coast is the latest country to show France the door. It follows other former French colonies like Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Chad and Senegal. But what has led to this situation? And how will Ivory Coast's move affect French plans? Our next report has the details.
Mali in 2022, Niger in 2023, Chad just now in December 2024. Former French colonies in Africa are growing accustomed to this sight. Scenes of French soldiers packing their bags and leaving. It's been happening every year since 2022.
My dear compatriots, dear brothers and sisters, we can be proud of our army, whose modernization is now a reality. It is within this framework that we have decided on the coordinated and organized withdrawal of French forces from Ivory Coast. Thus, the camp of the 43rd Marine Infantry Battalion in Port Bouet will be handed over to the armed forces of Ivory Coast starting this January 2025.
The next French troop withdrawal will take place in the Ivory Coast. It's scheduled for this month. France will hand over a military base in Abidjan to the Ivorian government. This is a hammer blow to French military ambitions in Africa, and it caps off a horrible few years for Paris. France was once a major colonizing power in West and Central Africa. It controlled multiple countries and millions of people. The French colonial empire in Africa broke up in the 1960s, but France maintained a strong military presence in its former colonies. Paris controlled multiple military bases in Africa. It had thousands of troops stationed in the continent, and things continued this way for decades. But the dominoes started to fall a few years ago. It started with military coups in 3 Sahel countries: Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger. The new military juntas weren't fans of the French presence, so one by one they began kicking French troops off their soil. Soon, other former colonies began protesting against the presence of French troops, coup-hit ones like Chad and stable ones like Senegal as well. Now, the Ivory Coast has joined them. The Ivory Coast is considered a staunch ally of France. They share warm ties, but even Abidjan doesn't want anything to do with French troops anymore. Part of this could be political. The Ivory Coast goes to polls in October. Anti-France sentiment has taken hold of all of West Africa. So President Alassane Ouattara might be playing it smart, appeasing the public during an election year. But even countries nowhere near elections have had enough of the French troops. Along with the Ivory Coast, Senegal has made an announcement as well.
I have instructed the Minister for the Armed Forces to propose a new doctrine for cooperation in defense and security involving, among other consequences, the end of all foreign military presences in Senegal from 2025.
That's another dependable French ally, telling France to pack up and leave in 2025. And Senegal doesn't go to polls till 2029. There doesn't seem to be any ulterior motive. They just seem done with the French military presence. This is a major setback for France. Paris had relied on its African bases to project power. They helped France wield influence in its former colonies. But now, that influence has all but dried up. After the French troops leave the Ivory Coast and Senegal, France will have a military footprint in only 2 former African colonies: Gabon in Central Africa and Djibouti far in the east. Reports say there are only about 350 troops in Gabon. This token force is expected to remain, but it's effectively the end of French military presence in its former West and Central African colonies. French President Emmanuel Macron recently made a speech in Djibouti. He said he wanted to change the logic of French military presence in Africa. By the looks of it, Africa has made the change for him.